Hello, here's your daily tip from Wolfe Realty. Today we're going to talk about personal property left at the property during final walkthrough or foreclosing. All right, so there's a lot of misconceptions here, and we get a ton of questions a lot of times about sellers leaving things at the home or sellers listing homes with things that they planned on leaving, but maybe they left more, or they left things and then they told the agent, well, I told you I was selling that with the house. For one, make sure you get everything in writing if your seller tells you that. For two, if you're a buyer's agent, make sure you're writing in your listing contract if the buyer wants all debris, trash, paint cans, tires, etc. removed from the property. You can put it in the exclude. So I think I typically use a phrase that says something along the lines of seller to have the property broom clean at final walkthrough, no trash, debris, paint cans, or other items shall be left for the buyer or shall be left at closing, something of that nature. Okay. So, all right. So overall, make sure you address that as a buyer's agent. The thing about that is a misconception. Let's say a seller leaves that personal property and you're at final walkthrough and the buyer says, I don't care, I'll just take it. Or the buyer says, wow, I love this couch, I'm going to keep it. Well, the chances are that's still the seller's property. You really need something in writing, and don't do it via phone call, but did the seller relinquish the property? Does the buyer have proof that the seller intended on relinquishing the property? And does the buyer have proof that the seller did, in fact, relinquish the property? Because if they didn't and you don't have it in writing, unfortunately, the buyer is going to have to store that property. For how long? Again, we're not lawyers. We can't advise the buyers on what is the appropriate amount of time and what is the due process under the law for that personal property. It's important that as an agent, you realize don't get involved after closing. Let's say the buyer says, hey, I'm good with it. Let's leave it. No big deal. Once that closing happens, it's important that you do not get involved past that closing. And oftentimes that other side will try to drag you back in, but once that closing is complete, you are there for the real estate. You're not there for personal property. If there's personal property being sold with the real estate, it's important to include an itemized list in your documents on the MLS saying these are the items that's going to be conveyed, or take pictures and put them there. But then keep in mind that you need to share that document with your seller. Personally, for me, I would get it initialed in the digital signing software or in person saying these are the items you're leaving. Here's photos of them. This is what you're going to leave there. Okay. So again, we can't advise how long, a buyer would need to keep that. And if it's in the contract and then the buyer says, hey, I don't want to close with this here, then you have a right to not close on that property as a buyer, and the seller would be in breach of contract. So it's important to have it in the contract and to make sure you're addressing that conversation with the buyer. Or sometimes I'll just put in there, seller may leave whatever the seller wishes not to take with them. That way a seller knows that they're able to leave those items. And I make sure the buyer knows that they could leave trash as well. So again, if a buyer's okay with it, just get it in writing. Listing agent, make sure your seller is aware the property needs cleaned out. So I think as listing agents, we don't want to tell a seller, hey, you need to take all your trash and your things that you think are valuable, that you think a buyer needs. If there's a list of like trim, paint, tile, flooring, etc. that goes with the house, and you want to leave it, I need to take that to them before we get to final walkthrough. Let's not let them walk through final walkthrough and find boards and nails and rolled up carpet and all these things in the property. Okay, let's let them know what it is. So if you've got any experiences through final walkthrough, definitely drop them below in the comments, and you can watch this again in the agent kit if you ever get to a final walkthrough and there is personal property there or trash. So definitely keep in mind that this video is here for you as a resource, and so am I. Feel free to call me if you've got any questions. Thanks so much.